company that operates a massive healthcare network in the Washington, D.C. area says its computer systems are slowly coming back online tonight. That's after a cyber attack, possibly for ransom.
And unless you actually pay, your computer is not going to work.
That appears to be what's happening to some local computers, but
hackers crippling computer systems at a major hospital chain. It's called MedStar Health, and it's forcing patient record systems offline for thousands of doctors, for nurses, and for the administrators. So what did the hackers want?
The latest version of ransomware targets computers and Android phones. And the FBI warns Apple devices are likely next up.
Another security scare involving your personal information. Hackers out there taking control of your personal computers, forcing you to pay to get the information back.
It's called ransomware, and it's nothing new, but the latest version cripples computers and destroys files.
Hi, my name's Chris Cox, and I'm a cybersecurity instructor here at CDSE. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic, ransomware. Ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that takes over your computer. Most often it does that by encrypting your data and then demanding a ransom to give you the key. CryptoWall version 3 is one example. It encrypts the files with the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES 256. AES 256 is incredibly secure. There are 110 quattro or vigintillion possible combinations. That's 11 with 77 zeros after it. By comparison, there are about 8 unvigintillion atoms in the solar system. That's an 8 with 67 zeros after it. The encryption is so complex that there's really not much chance that you could ever crack or even guess the password. In fact, if you had access to the fastest supercomputer in the world, it could run through all of these combinations in about 331 septenzillion years. That's 331 with 54 zeros. So now that we've defined ransomware, we're going to talk about some common signs of infection and how to apply risk mitigation strategies to avoid getting infected in the first place. And finally, we're going to discuss how to effectively use backups and recovery processes to help you recover in case you actually are infected. Now, the screen you saw earlier is a reproduction of kind of what you would see if your computer gets infected. It's enough to know that you no longer have access to your files and folders. But what's going on behind the scenes? Well, first, the malware encrypts your files and folders. Then it creates a key that you will need to decrypt them and actually access your information again. At some point, it will probably lock you out and display instructions on how to access your files. And some other versions will lock you out without encrypting your files at all, but those variants are becoming less and less popular with attackers. Often the attackers demand payment in Bitcoin, a virtual currency, which can be very difficult to track. What are the possible impacts of ransomware? What does it mean for you? In the first quarter of 2016, ransomware cost victims over $200 million, nearly 8 times the amount of all funds ransomed in 2015. And that's only those that are actually reported. Instances where the victim quietly pays the ransom aren't included in that figure. This accounts for approximately 17 million productivity hours lost by the end of 2016 due to ransomware. It's a serious problem. If you want to know a little bit more about how we got to this state, check out the Dig Deeper section at the end of this video. Now, the question you may be asking yourself, should I pay the ransom? Let's see what James Traynor, the former Assistant Director of the FBI Cyber Division, has to say about that.
Another issue is the number of variants and the complexity of the code associated with ransomware. So even if you pay, there are some that the code is written so poorly that the key that you get will not necessarily even unencrypt your data. So it is a dangerous business, but our position is always do not pay. So this is, again, a very, very complicated business for folks, and I would encourage people not to go it alone, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So.
There's a lot of ways that you can become infected with ransomware, which is why it's so important to understand this threat. Some common methods of infection are Trojan horses, which is malware hidden inside seemingly legitimate programs. If you download a game or a program, maybe from an untrusted source, it could include a malicious payload like ransomware. Social engineering or phishing is where the user is tricked into doing something they wouldn't otherwise do, like maybe executing a file that they get in their email. Or maybe a waterhole attack, where a seemingly trusted site is poisoned to spread malware. I have here a computer that's about to get infected by ransomware. You can see there's a seemingly innocent file on the desktop, in this case pretending to be a music program. Let's click on it and see what happens. So right after we click on the link, we see an unexpected pop-up message that seems kind of suspicious, a little bit unrelated to what we're expecting. What's actually happening right now is behind the scenes, the ransomware is starting to encrypt the files. You can see suddenly the load on the memory and even the CPU usage is climbing up because the computer's working even though it doesn't appear to be. That's always a warning sign when the computer's doing something that you can't see or that you didn't expect. You saw our icons right on the left-hand side of the screen. They very suddenly changed as well. What happened is that all of our critical files, our family pictures, our resume, and everything else was just now encrypted and the extension was changed. At this point, we cannot access these files because they've been encrypted by the ransomware. Now at this point, the files have been encrypted. This is the indication that it's completed that particular operation. And this is where the name Jigsaw comes from. The icon comes up and it informs you that your computer files have been encrypted, everything that you have, and offers you an option to recover those files. This particular version of ransomware gives you 24 hours to pay $150 in the digital currency Bitcoin in order to retrieve the key. Okay, and at this point the countdown has begun. All of the files that are encrypted are visible here, so it can show you which specific files it has already encrypted. You can scroll down, you can see it continues to go on. We have certain program files, we have personal files, we have things on the desktop, and so on. And as it deletes the files, it will mark it here that it's done so. Every ransomware variant is different. This particular version, appropriately called Jigsaw, encrypts every file on the system which would be lost within 72 hours unless the ransom's paid. This might affect some organizations more than others. For example, hospitals are a favorite target for attackers, perhaps because they're more likely to pay the ransom instead of risking their patients' lives or data. In March of 2016, Methodist Hospital of Kentucky declared an actual state of emergency after having their systems locked out by ransomware. Even worse, their backups were infected as well. This was right after a California hospital paid $17,000 to recover its files. Now, in the case of Methodist Hospital, they elected not to pay the ransom. They spent the following 5 days painstakingly cleaning up the infection from their systems, and were successful in doing it. But it's not just hospitals. Businesses, schools, individuals, and even police stations are being targeted more and more. So some measures that you can take to protect yourself include educate your users about ransomware. They need to know what to look for and what they can do if they suspect an infection. Patch your systems, your software, your firmware. Install and update antivirus and anti-malware software. Limit privileged accounts, which can be used to infect entire systems rather than individual user accounts. That goes as well for your home computers, which we often let run with administrative access for everything that we do. Consider making a secondary user account for most of your tasks. Configure your file directory and network share access controls to prevent write access. That way the ransomware can't spread as easily across the system. Disable macro scripts from Office files when they're transmitted via email. Implement software restriction policies to keep programs from executing from browser temp folders, for example. Talk to your IT staff about implementing gray listing and consider whitelisting on some servers as well. And this is important. Have good backups. So if you are infected, you can restore from known good media. And keep that known good media off-site as off-site backups, or at least keep software that's not stored on network systems. And perhaps most important, identify and back up your critical data. By now we have a greater understanding of what ransomware is and how it can impact your organization. We also know what to look for and what steps we can take to prevent infection. I want to thank you for spending time with us today. As always, you can visit cdse.edu for up-to-date information and other resources. Until then, I'm Chris Cox.